Welcome back, everyone, to the Wedge 52 Gridiron Podcast. I'm your host, Wedge. Today's episode will be the Ravens Week 3 recap, where the Baltimore Ravens, faced the Indianapolis Colts and had a very disappointing loss, 22-19 in overtime. And before we look into that further, how it happened, please make sure you smash that follow button right here on Spotify, as well as rate the podcast. And check out my Instagram at Wedge52Gridiron to be up to date when the newest podcast episodes drop, as well as my hymn performance of the week and almost game day content that I share on the weekly. Now let's jump into the Ravens Week 3 performance. The Ravens very disappointingly lost to the Indianapolis Colts. Some things kind of took a turn for the worse for us before the game even started, where the Ravens announced 7 starters, I want to say, listed as inactive for the game long before, I want to say it was Friday afternoon. So they already knew they were going into the game with a tall task at hand. Still a game that the Ravens should have won. Still a very winnable game for the Ravens, facing those Indianapolis Colts, who also were going against, a little bit of an injury to quarterback Anthony Richardson, who did end up missing the game due to a concussion. But I'm not sure if I mentioned in the podcast my Week 2 Ravens episode, but I was more worried about Minshew starting versus Anthony Richardson. I believe I spoke on that a little bit just because of Minshew's experience. He knows how to manage games a little bit better than Richardson does to this point. And Minshew has seen and experienced, playing against teams, that are projected and have higher levels of talent or more playmakers than his team, and finding a way and exploiting, the things that that team has weakness in. So I was already a little more concerned about that, as well as the Ravens announced injury report, a couple days before the game even, that had Odell Beckham, Ronnie Stanley, Tyler Linderbaum, Marlon Humphrey, and more players. There's a couple more in there. Darius Washington, I think. All dealing with injuries and being announced. Odafe Owe, being announced that they weren't going to play before the game even started. And Justice Hill, I want to say, was that 7th one that was on the injury report to not play before the game even started. So, not a good look already for the Ravens. They still, should have been able to handle business at home. But they were not. Let's talk about the offensive player of the week for the Ravens. A couple positives here before we dive too much into how the Ravens lost that game and kind of some things that they need to work on there as they get ready to face their Week 4 opponent, the Cleveland Browns, who took care of business against the Tennessee Titans. So the Ravens Offensive Player of the Week for the second week in a row is quarterback Lamar Jackson. He was 22 for 31, passing 202 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, as well as 14 for 101 yards and 2 touchdowns rushing. Lamar also did have a fumble, on a pump fake situation that kind of got, he kind of hit his arm on another player and lost the ball. It was a fumble that he lost there. But, 303 yards and 2 touchdowns for Lamar Jackson was really the brightest spot in terms of production for our offense on Sunday. There was really not a whole lot of other stuff. Gus Edwards, I want to say, had like 40 yards-ish before leaving the game with concussion protocol. Zay Flowers had like 50 receiving yards. Andrews had like 35, I think. So really, the offense just struggled outside of Lamar Jackson, who also, struggled just a little bit in terms of that. And then the Defensive Player of the Week, Mr. Kyle Hamilton, had himself a ball game. He was playing a little bit more inside at that slot corner position, closer to the line of scrimmage, to be able to just be a disruptor and a disruptor he was. Kyle Hamilton finished the game with 9 tackles, 3 sacks, 2 tackles for a loss, a forced fumble, and 1 pass deflection. An absolutely incredible game by Kyle Hamilton, by far the best of his career. He just doubled up his career sack total in one game last season as a rookie. I want to say he had 2.5 sacks throughout the year, and this week he just had 3. So a very, very good game by Kyle Hamilton. If he stays, down in that slot position, which I think he will now with the injuries here, he could stay down in the slot, and that's really where he, really started to ball out at the end of last season as well. Hopefully Marlon Humphrey comes back soon. Hopefully, hopefully Darius Washington, hopefully he comes back soon. We got Marlon coming soon. Rockerson, Ronald Darby have been playing very good football, filling in for Marlon Humphrey. So hopefully he continues to ball. I would hopefully expect him to stay down more on that slot cornerback position. One of the things that led to the Ravens, not winning that game, the Ravens had, they lost the ball 4 times, 4 fumbles. I don't really care about all 4. The ones that I care about and the ones that count to me are the 2 that we lost. So 2 fumbles for the Ravens. You're not going to win. You're not going to win the game when you're, throwing possessions away. You can't afford to, waste a possession, especially in a tight ball game like we found ourselves in on Sunday. Tucker missed a long field goal at the end of regulation, which looked good all the way up until the last couple of yards when it did fall short of that crossbar. A little surprising, but, he is human. I thought he made it. I, thought he was going to make it. But hey, if that's his one, game-winning miss of the season, so be it, Justin Tucker is still a GOAT. Justin Tucker has won the Ravens, 20 times the amount of games as he's lost us. So, as well as a couple of, no calls that the Ravens didn't receive, or, the Ravens did not benefit from a couple of no calls to late in the end of the game, the end of the overtime, as well as fourth quarter. The first of which being a blatant face mask call on wide receiver Zay Flowers. You can clearly see the entire hand of the Colts defender was inside Zay Flowers' face mask, and his entire head turned sideways. So no call on that, and actually the Ravens got flagged for holding on that play, further pushing us, away from being able to get the first down on that drive, as well as on the Ravens' last drive. I want to say a no pass interference flag thrown on, a Zay Flowers crossing route that was, clearly contact before Zay Flowers got to the ball. Defender had his arm wrapped around the backside and, twisted and slowed down Zay Flowers. While I don't think it was as blatant and obvious as some fans, many Ravens fans, might be thinking it is, or football fans, it definitely did affect his path to the ball. And I, definitely do think that should have warranted a pass interference. So, but regardless of those calls or not, the Ravens should not have even been in that position. The Ravens had several opportunities to score the football, to run out the clock, and the Ravens failed to do so. So regardless of the injuries they had going into the game and the long list of injuries I'm about to share that happened during the game, once again, the Ravens just can't seem to get away from the injuries. But, it is a little different this year. There's a lot of these injuries that guys should be returning from soon, knock on wood, where in years past, a lot of them, they haven't been able to return. So we'll see. But, it shouldn't have came to the ref throwing the flag or not. The Ravens, it should not have been a ball game with the Indianapolis Colts. 2 fumbles that entire second half. They barely had any yards. There was a stretch. First drive of the game, we had 80 yards or 75, however many it was. And then after that, we had 7 possessions in a row where it was horrible. It was awful. It is what it is. The Ravens should have won. Not should have won. They should have been in position to win that game without having to rely on those referee calls. During the game, Tylan Wallace suffered a hamstring injury. He was placed on IR, so he'll be out minimum of 4 weeks with that hamstring, as well as Gus Edwards got injured, and the following players got injured and did not return to the game. Gus Edwards, David Ojabo, Rashad Bateman, and Geno Stone. Hopefully those are majority of those are, week-to-week injuries and can be back, week 4, hopefully. Best case scenario, obviously. Or, week 5, week 6, coming back soon. As well as, some of the injuries that we already have, like Odell Beckham, who, I was surprised that he missed all of practice last week, as well as was inactive for this game. I'm hoping that was a little bit more of a precautionary instance, as the injury did not look serious during the game, and he seemed to be moving around normally, against the Bengals on the sideline after being ruled out. Linderbaum, Ronnie Stanley are hopefully progressing. Hopefully we'll be back. That would be huge to get them back for the Browns, who has the best defense in the league probably at this point. And, Ronnie Stanley could definitely help us out slowing down Myles Garrett. Although Pat McCarry has been solid filling in for Ronnie Stanley, and Morgan Moses has been an absolute dog the whole season so far, so shout out to him. But, it'd definitely be nice to get them back. Leading into that fourth quarter and overtime, those couple of possessions, I do wish that the Ravens play calling was a little bit different. I understand Monken and Harbaugh were trying to, run it inside, run power, safe percentage of plays to not fumble again, while trying to pick up yards. But I don't think that running Kenyon Drake and Melvin Gordon inside over and over was our best option there. Both of those guys were on our practice squad 2-3 days before the game. I would have preferred to see them, run an open pass concept, spread it out, 2x2 wide, 3x1, spread out the field, let Lamar drop back. If nothing's open, have Lamar run it. That was working the whole game. He had 101 yards on 14 carries. That's 8.5 yards per carry. And most of that was scramble type thing. Maybe 1 or 2 QB draws in there. I'd have liked to maybe see that more in that overtime series, a couple series we had there. I think that could have been, a greater success than Melvin Gordon up the middle. But hopefully they look at that. Hopefully that's something that they can change or keep in their pocket for the next time we have a critical drive late in a game where we need points. So it's kind of all I want to talk about. Other than that disappointing loss to the Indianapolis Colts. And now let's kind of move forward to week 4. Let's look at the Baltimore Ravens' next opponent and what they did in week 3. That's going to be the Cleveland Browns. They played the Tennessee Titans in week 3, and they won that game 27-3. That Browns defense, like I just mentioned, is top notch so far. They haven't played the greatest opponents. They did play the Bengals though, and the results were the same. We see how the Bengals are so far this year, but we also know that the Bengals, what they're capable of. So Browns defense is top notch. led by Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward. They're definitely going to possess a difficulty to our Ravens offense, who still is struggling. We still haven't had all of the pieces together yet. Week 2 we did against the Bengals there. We did for the first half till Odell got hurt, and it was looking much, much better. We're going to continue to progress that offenses. Hopefully we can get as many healthy pieces back for that game. But the Browns defense only allowed 94 total yards to the Tennessee Titans on Sunday. Myles Garrett had 3.5 sacks against, Tannehill and the Titans. The defense so far up to this point in the season ranks first in the league in yards, passing yards, rushing yards, points, and third down percentage. So the Ravens offense is going to have their work cut out for them, and they're definitely going to need to be clicking. If we play kind of choppy, poor ball control football like we did against the Houston Texans and against the Indianapolis Colts, it's not going to look pretty for the Baltimore Ravens. The Browns on offense, they like to run the ball. Obviously, we know that. Things have changed a little with the Nick Chubb situation, who it looks like I haven't seen any reports since this one I'm about to tell you guys. But it looks like he avoided a major knee injury. Looks like he just tore his MCL, which is still a 6 to 8 month recovery process. But it could have been a lot worse with the ACL, included in that. But to the last report that I saw, it does look like he avoided the 3 ligament tear like he did when he was at Georgia. So that is good news for Nick Chubb. But the Browns still dominated time of possession because of that dominant defense and by running the football 38-21 in terms of time of possession. So that's kind of similar to how the Ravens, used to operate for the past few years. This year so far, they're still at an advantage in the time of possession, I believe. I didn't look at the exact numbers, but just based off feel. But that's going to be a battle. Every possession is going to matter in this game. On Sunday, Deshaun Watson looked better against the Titans than he did week 2 against the Pittsburgh Steelers on Monday Night Football. But he didn't look great. I forget his exact stat line against Tennessee, but it was definitely better. Less turnovers, but nothing spectacular yet. Nothing like 2018, 2019 Deshaun Watson. So definitely something to still kind of keep an eye on over there in Cleveland for them. But he got the job done against Tennessee with the help of wide receiver Amari Cooper, who against the Titans had 7 receptions for 116 yards and 1 touchdown. Also Jerome Ford, first game, being the primary starter with Nick Chubb out. The Browns did sign Kareem Hunt late last week, so expect to see him get a decent amount of carries against this Ravens game here coming up next Sunday. Expect to see him get some good amount of carries, as he's been with the Browns franchise before for a couple of years. So he should be pretty familiar with a lot of the terminology and play style, and I'm sure some of that offensive line unit still carries over. So that kind of leads me into the Baltimore Ravens keys to success, some things that I think they should try and focus on if they would like to have a good shot at winning this football game next Sunday versus the Cleveland Browns. One of them, which I kind of just hinted on the Browns side of it, but one thing the Ravens could do is shut down the run on defense. When the Ravens are on defense, shut down the run. Obviously the Browns have had one of the better rushing attacks, much like the Ravens the past few years, and things may be different without Chubb here, especially the first couple of weeks, as they're trying to figure out, what their running game is going to look like now without Chubb. But shut down the run. Ford only had 10 carries for 18 yards and 1 touchdown in his first game without Chubb. So he was already, 1.8 yards per carry. Obviously, 18 yards is spectacular. If the Ravens can do something similar to that, or even better than that, that'll really put the Browns' offense in a bad spot. It'll put Deshaun Watson in a bad spot. It'll kind of force their hand and put the pressure on Deshaun Watson to make plays, which up to this point this year, we haven't seen him, at least I haven't seen him, be able to be that guy in big moments. The one game of theirs that I did watch live, for the most part, I watched most of the game live there, was against the Steelers, and he looked god-awful. Had the pick, I think, 2 fumbles. One of them was, they were down late in the game, trying to make a comeback, I want to say, or put points on the board. And he gets a strip sack, deep back on their own end zone, and TJ Watt picked it up and scored. So, if as much pressure as the Ravens defense can put on Deshaun Watson, I think that will help the Ravens force some mistakes out of Watson that can maybe get the Ravens offense an extra possession or two, which are going to be critical against this game. Maybe a tall task with the Baltimore Ravens edge injury situation with Ojabo, Owe. Both, we're going to see what their status is as the week develops, as well as, we're still missing Tyus Bowser. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how our edge position, our edge depth develops throughout this, this week here. But that could be one key, and then, that could help us get a couple extra possessions, and that leads to our offense, protect the ball. We can't waste any possessions this week. We can't have fumbles. Hopefully Lamar has no picks. We cannot afford wasted possessions when facing the number 1 defense in the league. By wasting a possession, we make the defense's job even easier. And we make it an easy job for something they're already good at. So if we do get, those extra possession or two by forcing a turnover, we need to protect it. We need to capitalize and get points off of that. And then my last, key to success for the Ravens to have the best chance at beating the Browns this upcoming Sunday is hopefully some healthy weapons, some weapons that can stay healthy throughout the game. One thing to counter a dominant defense is going to be, a lot of offensive weapons. Hoping that Bateman should be good to go. Hoping that Odell Beckham's good to go. Andrews and Zay Flowers have been healthy. Hopefully that stays the case. But, and also Tylan Wallace, he's going to miss this game. But if we can have a healthy Odell, Bateman, Flowers, Andrews, and Nelson Aguilar on the field, that should help, spread out that defense, help the Ravens offense, help Lamar Jackson, help our, damaged running back group. Hopefully Gus is back, hopefully Justice Hill. As many options, as many weapons that the Ravens offense can have is only going to benefit them going against the number 1 defense in the league up to this point so far in the season. So that's all I have for the Ravens Week 3 recap here on the Wedge 52 Gridiron. Thank you all for listening. If you're not a fan of the Ravens, thank you for listening especially. But make sure you tune in tomorrow for tomorrow's episode. It'll be the Around the League Week 3 recap, as well as a quick Week 4 preview. And stay tuned for the Week 3 Hymn Performance of the Week. Make sure you press that follow button right here on Spotify, as well as on Instagram at Wedge52Gridiron, and go Ravens.